the things that I have a lot of concerns about is the SEC's custody proposal. It undermines CFTC customer protection rules, conflicts with global margin treatment, would upend the derivatives and treasury markets, and adds complexity to institutional investment advisors and qualified custodians. Even worse, in response to questions from my staff, both CFTC and Treasury staff said the SEC did not coordinate with either agency, which is unacceptable. The impacts on the derivatives, commodities, and Treasury markets could cause systemic harm, and I strongly urge you to withdraw the proposal or completely rework it. It's difficult. The SEC is such an important entity, and yet it's hard for us to, give you the means that you need when you come out with this kind of stuff. I don't know how to say that in a nice way, but again, this rule is not a good rule. It has the potential of creating a lot of problems, and then also not working with CFTC and Treasury, which it affects in a great way, could affect in a great way.
If I might, just to put it in context, we've had a custody rule, and this is about investment advisors holding assets for their customers, since the 1960s. But then the Bernie Madoff events happened. They were terrible, really. And Congress came together and put a provision in that reform bill, Dodd-Frank, that specifically addressed that we, the SEC, would have not just new authorities, but should address the safeguarding of all client assets. It was no longer just the securities and funds held or on behalf of customers, but all client assets. That was in 2010, and here we are in 23, 13 years later, and we hadn't taken it up. So it's one of the remaining, I would say, we had about 8 of these when I came on board. 8 of the 54 things we're working on were still left over from Dodd-Frank. And we've got a lot of public feedback. It's important to take that feedback. We've met with the Commodity Futures Trading Commission. We've met with the Futures Industry Association about some of their comments, and we're taking those into consideration.
No, we appreciate it. But the reality is the markets have been very resilient, and again, we want to allow our farmers and others to manage risk. And our concern is this would blow up those markets, and the agency, again, you should consider, making significant changes based on all of the conversations that you've had. The Fed has recently warned of a potential credit crunch and further slowing of the economy. During the pandemic, we saw lenders use single-name CDS to hedge against credit drawdowns. However, many believe the SEC's proposed Rule 10b-1 would hurt liquidity and cause lending pullbacks, which is exactly the Fed's concern. We're in a high-rate environment, and the Fed is warning against credit pullbacks, yet the SEC proposals such as Treasury market reform, applying Rule 15c2-11 to fixed income, the dealer proposal and the Rule 10b-1 would all be major overhauls that could reduce access to credit. So I guess the question I would have, would you conduct a publicly available economic analysis of the cumulative effects of your SEC proposals on U.S. credit markets? And will you commit to coordinating with the Federal Reserve about the cumulative effects of SEC proposals on U.S. credit markets?
So I thank you for the question. There's a number of proposals that you mentioned related to the U.S. Treasury markets. There were 3 or 4 of those that you mentioned. And we have been in consistent dialogue with the U.S. Treasury, the issuer of U.S. Treasuries, on behalf of us, the American public, and the Federal Reserve, because they use Treasuries to conduct monetary policy and the various rules. So we've been in very good, close discussions with them. Second, we do have economic analysis in each of those. One's a Treasury market clearing, one's about Treasury dealers, and each of those we have robust economic analysis, but also have gotten feedback. What's the issue we're trying to deal with? We're trying to deal with resiliency. In the 2020 dash for cash, the starting part of COVID, there was really a significant issues in the U.S. Treasury market, and there were in the fall of 2019. And in part, what supported the Treasury market was the Federal Reserve buying a couple $1 trillion, give or take, of Treasuries. So it's really in an effort to have a little greater resiliency and competitiveness in that market. We, the taxpayers, ultimately benefit from that.
We appreciate it. Again, fragile economy, we just want to make sure that access to credit is not impaired even more. Very quickly, you mentioned that you got feedback in regard to Senator Coons's question about rushing rules. And so, the feedback we're getting is from the IG. And they said the IG report found that staff had limited time for, quote, research and analysis, end quote, meaning their economic analysis were rushed. So, we need to sort that out. And I know that you're working hard in that regard. You're trying to get a lot done, but that's the feedback that we're getting.